So good morning to all of you. I welcome you to this session of Big Data Analytics. We'll begin with the subject PPT so that we can understand what all we are going to learn in this course and how you're going to benefit out of it. So this is a brief faculty profile about me, Ajay Sharma. You already are, in touch with me since the previous semester. And this is a small profile. I hope that all of you have joined my YouTube channel, Tech Expert. Okay, if not, then you can join. Now, this is the syllabus for big data analytics. Okay, and it has been divided into 4 parts: section A, section B, section C, and section D. And you can see mostly the things are, calculative or numerical based or command based sort of things. Only the section A has got some theoretical aspect to it. Fine. So these are the books which you can follow. You can get it online. I can share it with you. Hadoop, the Definitive Guide by Tom White. This is a good book. And for Apache Pig, you can take up Programming Pig by Alan Gates. Both these books are available free for download. The other books are also there. All of you, you can get all these books online. You can download them. Now, why we are going to learn this subject? That's important. The basic objective behind studying this subject would be, number one, to understand big data and its applications. Okay, big data and its application areas, like where all we are going to use this big data. For that, we must first be aware about installing Ubuntu. This can be done as as a dual boot system along with Windows. Or if you are not interested in dual boot, then what you can do is you can install a virtual box, okay, within which you can install Ubuntu. Okay, so that is the thing that you can do. But it's very important that you do it in the beginning. Okay, beginning means in the first week itself, you should do this. That is, install Ubuntu and then later on install Hadoop also. Okay, so Hadoop can be installed on Ubuntu, and then we'll be learning about the Hadoop clusters. That is how a cluster works. Then we would be learning something known as the Hadoop distributed file system, its architecture. Okay, then there would be Linux commands. Linux you've already learned in the previous semester. I'm expecting that the learning is good. Otherwise, I will be revisiting those commands because HDFS commands or Hadoop commands are very much similar to Linux commands. Okay. Then we'll be working with the entire range of HDFS commands, and later on we'll learn how to install Pig. Pig is used for data analytics, and many multinational companies around the world are using Pig for their functioning. And we'll learn how to do data analytics with Pig, and then we'll be working with a few case studies based on analyzing data sets. So these are the objectives of the subject. Not too much work, but very interesting and very good thing. You can really benefit out of it at a later stage in your careers. Now, what are the application areas of big data analytics? First of all, the syllabus that we have designed is compatible with the latest industry standards and requirements. And you, after learning big data analytics, you can pursue your career in either as a data analyst or a data scientist, or you can work for enterprises which rely on data analytics. Thing known as sentiment analysis is really in demand right now, like understanding the sentiment of people to really use it for a enterprise benefit. And you can do any other data analytics job once you've learned this course. So these are the brief application areas, or you can say course outcomes for this subject. Assignment you already understand. It's a very important component, and I expect you to work properly on it, because once assignment is done, then half your work for your examinations or any review work is over, provided you do it on your own. So the first assignment would be based on sections A and B. Okay, and the second assignment would be based on section C, and the third assignment would be based on section D. Each assignment will be of two sections, section A and section B. So in section A, we'll have 6 questions of 2 marks each, that is total 12 marks. Section B, 3 questions of 4 marks each, that is 12 marks. So the total marks per assignment would be 24. So 3 assignments of 24 marks you are supposed to submit, and kindly, it's my request, you submit it in time, because late submission usually I don't allow. Okay, so I'll be telling you the dates quite well in advance this time, because I think you have got a lot of work to do in all your subjects, so you tend to forget things. So I'll be monitoring this thing that you submit these things in time. Then sessional exam also, you understand that your first sessional exam would be based on the first 2 sections of your syllabus, and the second sessional exam would be based on the section C and D. And sessional marks is 30, time is 2 hours. And this was the thing when you were in college, in offline classes, that there is 2 sessionals per day. So we can't say much about it right now. Maybe online daily 1 exam would go. Okay, we'll see when the time comes for these sessionals. Now let's come to the second important part, that is big data analytics lab. That is a lab work that you're going to carry out. First of all, the software that you'll be using is Ubuntu. You can choose any stable version. Okay, I'll be using Ubuntu 16.04. Then the Hadoop, either the Hadoop 2.x series or 3.x series. And for Pig, 2 versions are available, which are quite similar, not much difference in them. That is Pig 0.16 and Pig 0.17. So these are the software that we would be using for our lab. Now the lab evaluation methodology, how we are going to evaluate your lab. So it is consisting of 2 parts. Part A, that is continuous practical evaluation. That is, you'd be given machine exercises, and you would be supposed to submit them so that they can be evaluated. Okay, and this your internal would be of 30 marks. Then your part B of the lab would be evaluated as an external component in your external Viva, in which you are supposed to create a small project or an application, or to carry out a case study, which would be assigned to a group of 4 students, and which would be evaluated for a total of 20 marks. Now, one thing is very clear here, that you need to work on this part B right from the beginning, because we would be learning things at a fast pace, and you should, all the students in the group should be in such a mode that they are in an interactive mode. They know the group members and they are carrying out the work properly. It shouldn't be like this, that one student is doing and the rest, the 3 students, they are not doing anything. And that won't be beneficial either, from the learning viewpoint or from the evaluation viewpoint. So kindly be very clear about this. Start working on part B right from the beginning. Maybe after 2 weeks of your classes, theory and lab, you should start working on part B. So these are the list of practicals that you're supposed to carry out in part A and part B. This is a small, not a very large list. Things can be added into it. Okay, so in part A, we'll be learning about installation of Ubuntu, installation of Hadoop and Pig, then running Linux commands, running HDFS daemons and HDFS commands, running safe mode and other Hadoop DFS admin commands, and learning about Pig operators and Pig functions. And in part B would be, based basically on analytics. We would be analyzing data sets using Pig, and we'll be carrying out a small case study or a project for analyzing a data set for a specific category, right? This will discuss how we need to do. So this is the list of practicals for your part A and part B. Okay. So this was regarding your subject PPT, both the theory as well as the lab. I hope you've understood what needs to be done. Okay. So let's now begin with our big data analytics subject. Okay. And first of all, in the very first thing about big data analytics, we need to know why we study it. So for this, we'll be revisiting the RDBMS that we have learned in the previous semester. Okay, so we see data analysis with DBMS and RDBMS, how it is carried out. Okay, so first of all, we understood or we learned what is DBMS, what is RDBMS, what is the definition, what is the purpose, and then we learned about record-based data models, relational, hierarchical, and network. We also learned about the ER model, which is used for modeling of data, and which is also, helps us in effective table design. That is, once we have understood ER model, we can make good tables. Okay. Then we learned SQL in our RDBMS. SQL is structured query language. Okay, so it helps us in the creation of data, storage of data, processing of data. You've already worked with it in your theory and lab sessions. You made project also based on it. So I hope that the learning is good in SQL. Then the basic data types in SQL you learned. There are many, but primarily we learned this char, varchar2, number, and date. Then we learned about the columns, the tuples, and the tables. Then we learned about the DDL statements, that is creating tables, creating views and other objects, and then constraints, how we can put constraints on our data so that we have got an effective table design. Then to display the data using the select statement, and then using the DML statements like insert, delete, and update to manipulate our data, right? Now, what are the limitations of DBMS and RDBMS? You see, DBMS or RDBMS, it works with structured data only. It is not designed in a way that it can handle unstructured data. Okay, so structured data, by structured data I mean table data. That is, first of all, we must create a structure, populate it with values, and then do the analysis, then do the extraction of data, insertion of data, deletion of data. But to begin with, structure is very important. Whereas when we think of unstructured data, we are considering formatted audio, video, image data. Okay, that is audio, video, images in a specific format, or we can have any format of audio, video, image data. All of you understand it because you really share a lot of such data on all your social media apps. Then we can have chat data also. So all this comes under unstructured data. That is, we don't know the structure in which it is going to come in front of us. Okay. Then RDBMS can handle only structured data, and it only processes a sample of data. That is, it is not going to pick up a huge amount of data at a time. It will just pick up a sample of data for analysis. And when it comes to huge amounts of data, then RDBMS is not meant for that. When I talk of huge amounts of data, I talk of data in terms of terabytes, petabytes, like this. Okay. So this was regarding your RDBMS visiting. We just revisited your RDBMS. Now let's come to learning about big data. Okay, this would be interesting. So we're going to learn about big data analytics, right? So first of all, what is data? Because we are going to learn about big data, two terms, big data. So first of all, we must understand what is data. Okay, so the answer would be simple. Anything and everything around us is data. We are surrounded by data. We are flooded by data. We are dealing with data. We are picking up data. We are creating data. So data is everywhere, you can see. I hope you will agree with me on this, right? Now, where does it come from? Where does the data come from? It comes from everywhere. We speak, that's the data. I'm recording this meeting with you all. So this is a data which can be used later on for you to understand the concepts of this subject. We are moving, okay? That movement can be recorded by satellites. Sensors are there, computers are there, documents are there. This is a small list. Actually, everything is picking up data, is spreading data. Okay, so we can say that the data is coming from everywhere, right? Now, classification, we understand that either the data would be structured or unstructured, but you would agree that the data that we are talking of, the data that we are dealing with is unstructured in nature. Okay, so it could be human generated data, emails are there, blogs are there, videos are there, pictures are there, or it could be machine generated data. That is, a machine can give you an alert, like if you put a microwave for 2 minutes, once it is over, then it gives you a beep that the process is over. So automatic alerts, logs are there. By logs, we mean that when a process starts, everything from the beginning of the process to the end of the process is recorded. One thing. Otherwise, if you are using a centralized computer facility, the moment you log in to the moment you log out, all the actions that you've taken up in that session can be recorded. Okay. Then sensor data is there. Okay. CCTV cameras are there. So many things are there. So the question now is that if there is so much data, what is the meaning of this term big data? Okay. So there are many definitions of big data. I picked up two standard definitions. Okay. First definition obviously is that big data, okay, is the term for a collection of data sets so large and complex. So understand, two things are there. The collection of a data set which is very large, huge, and very complex. That means it is containing unstructured data. So it becomes difficult to process it using on-hand database management tools or traditional data processing applications. What do we mean by this? That the RDBMS that we learned, okay, is not capable, it is not designed in such a way that it can handle this unstructured huge amounts of data. Okay, so anything which is unstructured is huge. Okay, in size, it cannot be processed by the traditional DBMS tools, can be termed as big data. Okay. Similarly, big data technologies, they can be defined as a software tool for analyzing, processing, and extracting data from an extremely complex and large data set with which traditional management tools can never deal. So two definitions, same purpose. That is, we need to, obviously, when we are talking of a data set, the idea is to analyze it first, then process it, then extract data from it, and in the next step, which is very prevalent nowadays, is to generate some predictive analytics. That is, to predict something based on this data. So to do that, we don't have the traditional tools. We don't have the tools which they can do it, like the tools that we have been using, the DBMS, RDBMS. They are not designed for analyzing or managing big data. Okay. So what we do, we see that now big data is everywhere, just like data is everywhere, big data is everywhere. Okay. I'm just picking up a few things which would, tell you that big data is everywhere. It's there in our experiments, in our research. Photo sharing, you share hundreds, thousands of photos, not one person, millions of people sharing millions of photos, huge data. CCTV cameras, every CCTV camera is recording 24 hours. Okay, so just see the amount of data that we have. The social networking sites, okay, the WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, okay, then the e-commerce sites are there, okay, Amazon, Flipkart. Point of sales is there. So what do you mean to point of sales terminals? Like you have this machines, where you insert your cards to pay. That is a point of sale terminal. Okay, so I think you use it everywhere. Okay, you can use UPI also. You can use credit and debit cards also. And then last but not the least, your mobiles. They are a storehouse of big data. You are always demanding more. I want 32 GB, I want 64 GB, I want 128 GB. Okay. And then we talk of, big amounts of RAM and storage to manage that big data, right? Now, this data is rising exponentially. As you can see in this figure, in 2005, we had 130 bytes of 130 exabytes of data. Just see this figure. In 2005, we were dealing with data in the size of 130 exabytes. Then 2010, we were dealing with this much. Just see in 2020 what we are dealing with. Okay. So have you people heard about this exabyte? I hope that you have heard about it. Okay, exabyte is a unit, a basic unit for our big data. We have got higher units for that also. Okay, for that, just look at this graphic. Okay, so when we were in 90s, we were just limited to this MBs. Okay, then a few years later, GBs, then TBs. Okay, so megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, petabyte, and then we talk of exabyte. An exabyte is 10 raised to power 18 bytes. Okay, beyond that, the size is increasing, so we need more units to express this big data. So after exabytes, we have a zettabyte. Okay, zettabyte is 10 raised to power 21. A yottabyte, 10 raised to power 24. A zenottabyte, 10 raised to power 27. Then a Shilent no byte. Okay, Shilent no byte, and then a Deme Game Grotte byte. Just see, we may go beyond this also, because this data is huge. Okay, and it is increasing exponentially, as you can very well see from this. See the rise here. It is almost you can say 300 times, I would say. Okay, just see how it is rising. So now we can expect this rise every year, right? So that's why the need for all these data sizes. Okay, fine. I hope you've understood this, what is big data. Okay, how we can define it, how the traditional tools are unable to store, manage, and analyze this data. So when we talk of analysis, first of all, we need to store this big data. Now, where would you store it? When you talk of your laptops, all of you might be having a laptop of 1 TB, 2 TB hard disk, 4 TB hard disk, but a minimum size of a big data file is 1 TB. So just imagine how it can be stored and how it can be analyzed. Okay, so storage is one problem, keep this thing in mind, and analysis is the other problem. Okay, all right, let's move further. Let's move further now. Okay, so we'll see a historical preview, like how this big data technologies have emerged. Okay, a very important one, because whenever we learn something that is happening, we must see how it actually came into being, into existence, by taking a historical preview. Okay, so you see, in the year 2002, Google was facing the problem of storing huge files automatically on its servers. Okay, so with the increasing size, with the upcoming social networking sites, the storing of files was a big problem. That Google faced this problem in 2002. And the second problem that Google faced was, once the storage is there, how to perform analytics on those files. Okay, so for problem one, that is storing huge files automatically on its servers, Google wrote a white paper known as Google DFS, that is Google Distributed File System. Okay, kindly note down these things very carefully. For problem of storing huge files automatically on its servers, Google wrote a white paper known as Google DFS. Okay, so white paper is usually written for problems for which immediate solution is not available. So a solution is sought from multiple vendors, from companies, and then a solution can be zeroed on to pick up the best solution for that existing problem. So Doug Cutting was a person. Okay, he was a search framework developer. He designed the Lucene search engine, which is used in Linux environments. Okay, he was also working on the distributed file system. Okay, so see the scenario. Google was having this problem. It wrote a white paper. White paper would mean that it listed out what are the difficulties in storing these huge files and how we can, what solution can be found for them. So Doug Cutting was also working on the distributed file system at that time, and Yahoo hired Doug Cutting in 2002. Okay, and he took 2 years to fully implement this DFS and named it Hadoop. Okay, so who is the founder of Hadoop? Is Doug Cutting. Okay, actually two people are there, but primarily we talk of Doug Cutting when it comes to Hadoop. Okay, and once it was, this was implemented, Yahoo implemented Hadoop as a framework in its full-fledged production environment. Okay, so Yahoo is the company which implemented Hadoop as a framework, and then later on it donated this to Apache. Okay, Apache, is a freeware society which provides you software free of cost. Okay, something known as an Apache Software Foundation is there. And when Yahoo donated this to Apache, it became a full-fledged project on Apache. For problem 2, okay, so when we talk of problem 2 here, performing analytics on those files. Okay, for this, Google wrote another white paper known as Google MapReduce algorithm. Okay, so 2 white papers were written by Google. Number 1 was the Google DFS, that is the Google Distributed File System, and the second white paper was Google MapReduce algorithm. So this MapReduce is related with the analytics of huge, amounts of data. Okay, so duck cutting and Yahoo, they implemented this into its own solution as a full-fledged production environment and donated it to Apache as a full-fledged project. So both these free softwares, that is the Hadoop, its ecosystem, all the parts of Hadoop, these are free to use. You can download them and you can use them. You can contribute to its improvement also, but it is free of cost. Okay, fine. Then we come to a brief history of big data, like how big data came into existence. Okay, the set of storage and processing methodologies commonly known as big data emerged in the early 2000s. Okay, and it emerged from the search engine providers Yahoo and Google. You know that, right? So the search engine providers were the first group of users faced with internet scale problems. Okay, the problems of huge size of data that these companies needed to store on their servers. Okay, how to store and process these huge amounts of data. So the same thing in 2003, Google released a white paper, the Google File System or the Google DFS. In 2004, the white paper, exact name, MapReduce, simplified data processing on large cluster. Okay, and then Yahoo hired duck cutting, and then he invented the Hadoop. Okay, so all these things are there. You can just read this on the slide. Okay, okay. So storage and processing principles. Okay, so whatever was asked in the white papers, duck cutting incorporated them in his software, that is Hadoop, and the resultant product is what is known today as Hadoop. So Hadoop was born in 2006. So in 2003 and 4, the white papers were written. So after 2004, duck cutting took 2 years to implement this and created something known as Hadoop, and it was given to the Apache Software Foundation licensing scheme. Okay, then around the same time, when the Hadoop project was evolving, there were problems. The e-commerce was on a rapid rise. People were selling and buying over the net. That is what e-commerce is. Okay, electronic commerce. And the birth and rapid growth of mobile internet. If we talk 10, 12 years or 15 years down the line, then we didn't have all these apps and all these speeds, you see, the ones that you're using today. So then people were writing blogs also. There was user-driven web content, social media was there. Okay, so all these things, led to something known as a data deluge. Okay, the flood of data. Okay, and then out of it came the concept of unstructured data and the concept of no SQL platforms. Very important. Okay, no SQL platforms. So no SQL means not only SQL. That is, we don't have only structured data, we have got unstructured data also with us. Okay, and then Apache Software Foundation, you see, is a non-profit organization. It was it evolved in 1999, and it is providing you an open source software structure and framework for developers so that you can contribute to your projects, encourage collaboration and community involvement, protect volunteers from litigation. Litigation means like if you're using a licensed software and you're not purchased a license for it, so you can get into a legal, tangle, right? So when you're using a software which does not require a license, you don't get into any litigations. That is legal aspects. And the Apache Software Foundation basically is based on the concept of meritocracy. That means projects are governed by merit. Okay, fine. So we were discussing the historical preview. So we reached here at Apache Software Foundation. Since we are using free softwares from this society. So contributors, like who is contributing to these softwares is the developers who are contributing their code or documentation to projects. And there are many people, like committed people are there. Okay, and they all have signed something known as a contributor license agreement. Okay, and they all have an apache.org email address. So these are the people who are providing the free softwares to you. Okay, so you can read about it on this slide. Now a lot of apart from Hadoop, other solutions for big data analytics are available in the market, so you should be knowing about them. Tableau is one. Okay, SAS is one. IBM and Oracle provides a range of tools for big data analytics. Revolution is very important. Many companies are using Revolution also. Revolution actually is based on Hadoop itself. Okay, and then R language is also there, which is an open source tool for statistical computing, right? So now, what is the difference between the analytics that we've been doing uh, for long and big data analytics? That is, what is the traditional analytics, okay, versus big data analytics, okay? So this traditional analytics is basically, it started as something known as a business intelligence. That is how to generate information which can benefit businesses, right? So what they do, the traditional analytics, they go in for descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics, right? And these big data analytics is basically, the idea behind it is to predict something for future. That is predictive analytics. And when we talk of data in this traditional analytics, limited data sets are there. Data is first cleaned and the models are simple. Okay, there's not much fuss about it because we are dealing here mostly with structured data. And when we talk of big data analytics, we have raw data, complex data models, more types of data as we learned, okay, and large scale data sets. And this BI or the traditional analytics is something which asks what happened and why. Okay, and then this big data analytics actually correlates that this happened, so it can be projected that in future this will happen, something like this. That is, it is based on correlation, and it is simply based on causation. That is what and why. So this is the difference between traditional analytics and big data analytics. Okay. So let's now come to the next one. Okay. The next is understanding Hadoop. Okay. So we'll be understanding Hadoop in this slide. Okay. Let me just go through and see whether we have not missed anything here. Yeah, we have done this historical view. Fine. So let's now discuss about Hadoop. I hope you are taking screenshots, because you see, once you are aware, you can really work with things. So initial awareness is very important for all of you. So kindly note down things, take screenshots, make some good files based on whatever we are learning in this class, right? So this is now understanding Hadoop. Okay. So, this Apache Hadoop is a framework for running applications on a large cluster built of commodity hardware. Okay. So what is commodity hardware? Commodity hardware is something which is cheap hardware, and which is prone to failures. Okay. So when we are talking of a cluster, so what is a cluster? Is a group of thousands of computers. Like Yahoo has got a cluster, Facebook has got a cluster, Google has got its clusters. Okay, so all these clusters are having good systems, but still we call them commodity hardware because they are prone to failures. Big servers are not prone to failures. Okay, but simple machines, for example, if I talk of a cluster machine, okay, it would be ideally an i7 machine. You'd be surprised with that, I suppose, right? So in a cluster, we have i7 machines. Still, we call it a cheap commodity hardware because we have got servers which are very expensive. So these systems in the cluster, okay, apart from server, they are prone to failures. Okay, that is why we are keeping, you know, thousands of them, so that if one fails, we can just put our concentration on the next one. Okay, and then Hadoop is a reliable shared storage system. Okay, a framework for MapReduce. We learned what is MapReduce. That is the analytics part of our Hadoop, and it's a top level Apache project. Okay, so you can read the things, flexible and available architecture for large scale computation and data processing on a network of commodity hardware. This is what Hadoop is. So open source software is there, commodity hardware is there, and what it gives you in combination is an IT cost solution. Okay, that is cost effective solution. You don't spend too much on these analytics. So this we have already learned, so I'll just go through it because I want to put these things in front of you time and again so that you understand what Hadoop is based on, right? We have a white paper in 2003, Google File System, a white paper in 2004, MapReduce, simplified data processing on large clusters, and from these two came the concept of Hadoop made by Doug Cutting, right? Okay, so you can read it on the slides that the Google white papers inspired Doug Cutting. Then he incorporated the storage and processing principles. Very important. Like Hadoop has got two things. A storage component is there for storing huge amounts of data, and a processing model based on MapReduce. After MapReduce, many technologies have come, but all of them rely on MapReduce in the background. Okay, and it was born in 2006. Okay, so we have just gone through this, just a repetition of things here. Yeah. Now let's come to this summary. Okay, the summary for whatever we've learned so far. You can see Hadoop was written by Doug Cutting and Mark Caffarella, right? The other person was this in 2006. In 2007, it was given to Apache Software Foundation. Important slide, you can just click it. Initially, Hadoop was adopted by Yahoo. Okay, so initially it was adopted by Yahoo and later by companies like Facebook and Microsoft. Just read the things now. Yahoo has about 1 lakh CPUs and 40,000 nodes for Hadoop. Just see this. Okay, the largest Hadoop cluster has about 4,500 nodes, and Yahoo runs about 8,50,000 Hadoop jobs every day. And Hadoop follows a scale out strategy. That means when we talk of a scale out strategy means like if we have a cluster of 100 nodes, 100 computers, and it is processing data in 1 hour. Okay, I'm taking an example. And if we just scale it out, if we put another 100 machines, the computation time would be half. Okay, and you can see that this Apache Hadoop has already set a benchmark by sorting 1.42 terabytes of data per minute. In 1 minute, it has sorted. Okay, sorting is a very complex, very expensive procedure, but 1.42 TB data in 1 minute, that is a benchmark set by Hadoop, which no other software has been able to do. Now, important thing, most of your Hadoop is written in Java, but it has support for many programming languages, okay, such as C, C++, okay, and RDBMS technologies, they were written for frequent modifications. The idea behind RDBMS is frequent modifications, whereas Hadoop has been written for frequent reads. Remember this important distinction. You do a lot of insertions, updations in your RDBMS SQL, okay, but Hadoop, you just store the data once in the cluster, okay, and then you read it multiple times at a very fast pace. You don't do any updations in a cluster. Remember this thing. Okay, and then we are going to learn something about Hadoop ecosystem. Okay, that is the next thing that we learn. that is Hadoop ecosystem. Ecosystem means the various components of Hadoop, whatever the parts of Hadoop are there that comprise the Hadoop ecosystem. Okay, so you can read, we have got these Hadoop ecosystem components. The HDFS, you can see it is at the lowest level, the storage part. Okay, Hadoop distributed file system. Above that is the component that is the processing component, that is MapReduce. Okay, so initially it was called MapReduce in the first version, and in the second version it is called Yarn, that is yet another resource negotiator. Okay, then we have got something known as Hive. Okay, something known as Hive, right? Yeah, I'm back. Right, so we have the Hadoop ecosystem components, HDFS, the storage component, Hadoop distributed file system. Hive is for analytics. Similar to your SQL, we have the HQL, that is Hive query language. Then Pig is another analytics language. Then Yarn, as I discussed, is the yet another resource negotiator. Then there is Flume, Scoop, Oozie, Zookeeper, Mahout, and Ambari. We'll be learning about these things in detail today itself, right? So let's come to that part. All right. So we will learn Hadoop in detail. So we'll start with this. Yeah, Hadoop now. Okay. So Hadoop is based basically, kindly note these things very carefully because it would be required in all your later work. Okay. The concept you must understand. Hadoop is based on the concept of data locality. Okay. So by data locality, we mean bringing the computation to the data. This is important. I think you understand that whenever we need to process some data, we take the data to processing. But here, the data stays where it is. Okay, and the processing comes to it. This is known as data locality. And Hadoop enables large data sets to be processed locally on the nodes. So we have not understood the architecture so far, but I can just tell you right now that there are hundreds and thousands of nodes in a cluster. The data is stored on all these nodes, and data present on each node is processed separately. It doesn't have any connection with the other nodes. Okay, so there is something known as a shared nothing approach between these nodes. So two things on which Hadoop is based: first, the data locality, and then the second one, the shared nothing approach. Okay, so each node can independently process a much smaller subset of the entire data set without needing to communicate with one another. So what we are dealing here with is, you see, there is a huge a big huge data set. So it can be divided into subsets. Okay, it can be split up into parts. The parts can be stored on different nodes. The data can be processed on all these nodes without interacting with the other nodes. Okay, that is how the processing is there in Hadoop. We'll learn these things in detail, of course, and we'll see this also, like how we pick up the huge file, how it is split up into parts. Okay, then Hadoop, important thing, Hadoop is schemaless. Okay, with respect to its write operations. Okay, that's why it is known as a schema on read system. Okay, so we don't need any schema. That means we don't need to have any structure. So Hadoop is basically, it can deal with structured data also, but basically it is called schema on read system. Okay, it is schemaless. It is dealing primarily with unstructured data. Okay, so what is the difference between schema on read systems and schema on write systems? Okay, so RDBMS is your schema on write system. That is, first you must have a schema, you must have a table, a structure, only then RDBMS can work. Whereas your Hadoop is a schema on read system. Okay, Then we have NoSQL platforms. So NoSQL means not only SQL, right? Okay. So like we have Oracle, which is based on SQL. Microsoft server is there. SQL Server is there. Your DB2 is there. All of them are based on your structured systems. Whereas we have got NoSQL databases, okay, which can work with SQL, but they can work without a structure also. So examples are the Apache HBase and the Apache Cassandra. Okay, fine. So Hadoop is designed to find needles in haystacks. Okay, so it can pick up the minutest detail out of a huge amount of data. So we say it is designed to find needles in a haystacks. I hope you understand what is a haystack, right? So now let's go through all those Hadoop systems, ecosystem components. We have this Hadoop core components, HDFS and YARN. Okay, so YARN is another name for MapReduce. Remember this thing. Okay, HDFS is Hadoop storage subsystem. YARN can be thought of as Hadoop's processing scheduling subsystem, right? Okay, so remember YARN is your MapReduce version 2, and HDFS is your storage component of Hadoop. Okay. So we were talking of a cluster. So a cluster is a collection of systems that work together to perform functions such as computational or processing functions, and each component is independent of one another and can operate on its own cluster. Okay. So we can have we have a HDFS thing and a YARN thing together. When we combine both of them, that is when we have the storage as well as the processing. By combining them, we come across something known as a Hadoop cluster. Okay, remember, so what is a Hadoop cluster? A Hadoop cluster is a collection of thousands of nodes which give you a storage component known as HDFS and a processing component YARN. So together they form something known as a Hadoop cluster. Okay, then we have Hadoop ecosystem projects. Okay, so all these projects, there are many projects. Flume is there, Scoop is there. Okay, see, data ingestion projects such as Flume and Scoop, or data analysis tools such as Pig or Hive. Okay, they are also known as ecosystem projects, right? So if we go back here, HDFS and YARN, they are the Hadoop core components. Remember, they are the basic of Hadoop. That is what a cluster is made up of, a YARN and a HDFS. And the further components, Flume, Scoop, Pig, Hive, they are all called Hadoop ecosystem projects. Okay. There is another very important ecosystem component which we may relate to Hadoop and which is really in demand today, that is the Apache Spark. Okay, but since Spark does not require Hadoop to work, so we can consider it as a separate thing from Hadoop. Okay, so when we talk of data analysis, we have got Spark, Pig and Hive. Okay, these are the, so we are dealing with Hadoop ecosystem projects. Data analysis, if we need to do something known as a Spark is there, Hive is there, Pig is there. If data ingestion is to be there, so Flume and Scoop is there. Okay. If we talk of NoSQL databases, we have got Apache HBase and Accumulo, right? And if we talk of security, we have got Knox and Sentry. You see, we don't need to study all these things in detail, but we must be aware of their nomenclature, right? In this course, we'll be dealing only with HDFS, YARN and Pig. Okay. But for your information, I've added all these things. Okay.